Thanks for coming back for Season 3, Episode 2. Today we're going to look at some config files, and I remember my first job in IT where I was messing with config files, working for an American company. We were a wireless ISP, and I was working on some Sun Solaris kit, and the smallest typos, I think it was Apache back then, on Sun. It couldn't have been Apache on Sun. Whatever it was, I remember making the smallest mistake in a config file, and yes, it's cold by the way, had massive ramifications and nothing worked. And I learnt the hard way the importance of paying attention to config files, especially making a backup before you go and make some crazy changes. That takes us into a whole chat about Git, which we're not getting into for now. I don't want to mess with your head. So that brings us to today's episode of modifying the Ansible config file and getting some general awareness about the config file. So how excitement. But before I touch on that, I did want to cover something that some of you guys and girls may have already touched upon already. Some of you may be a little bit more advanced and with your new Linux distro pop, dirty pap, you're trying to connect to old school routers. You may have found some stuff from GNS3 or EV, whatever it's called, and it's really old, and you're just getting these weird Diffie-Hellman key exchange issues. What I recommend there is edit, and I'll show you the lines you've got to modify, but you've got to cater for weak ciphers and keys. To do that, you've got to edit their etc ssh config. And if you see where I say folling as opposed to following, I'll put that in the description. Put that in the file. I will actually quickly show you where. And 1 second as I do that, because I don't know where I'm typing right now. You'll get that with me. So we're going to cat etc ssh config. Now I'll show you where you've got to actually do that. It's down here, just in here. That will be commented out. Appreciate if you could put that in this file and then save the file. And the way we save in Nano is Control X to escape, and it'll say you've modified the file. Yes, you want to save, then exit. Now, if it says, hey, you can't, that's a read-only file, as a spat, that's anti-COVID. That's because you got a sudo nano etc etc etc. So that's a great way to lower or lessen your security to cater for weaker keys and ciphers. Now, you don't do that in prod. You probably find yourself taking the exit with the security guards if you did that in prod. But for your home lab, that's fine. Get it done. Excellent work. Remember, press pause anytime if you get stuck, or shoot me a comment. So now we get into the Ansible config file, and we could talk about it for days, or let's get rid of my ugly mug. Let's just look at it. So the Ansible config file, it describes our environment. So I'm just going to use Nano quickly because I just want to go over some things. But it describes where our inventory file is, where the library is to the various modules, so the other Python scripts or packages from the Ansible team or the community that you're going to add that does some type of execution, where the files are where we store temporary things before pushing out, or when we're collecting facts, for example. The forks, so how many things we can do in parallel, etc. Timeouts, they'll be in here. That could be an interesting one if you've got a SSH across the world or to some part of Africa, or if you've got to bounce up off a satellite. Satellites themselves, you're looking at about 600 mil of latency. I've had to do a bit when I was in some mining. We would bounce up to low Earth orbit, and we'd come down to Perth, or that was the space station in Perth, or the landing station in Perth, to get out to places out at Barrow Island, I believe we were, out on the Gorgons. I forget where there was. We were doing some mining project. It was barges. It was back when there was unlimited money in mining. So those days are gone. And you can also, if if you're up for it later, this is another place where you can mess with how the visual pleasure of Ansible when it runs. And as you're going to see, we're going to get a lot of Linux green, black, red. Obviously red is errors, yellows, etc, etc. You can modify them in here. I request that you go and learn a little bit more about this file by first making a backup. Go learn the file, and yeah. So one of the other big things was the host checking. Now, when you're at home, first time connecting to devices, you're going to SSH into a device, and it's going to say, do you accept this key for this host? Obviously, that can sometimes play a bit of havoc in your plays, and you'll spend a lot of time debugging, and then you'll look, oh, I haven't SSH'd into this. For our lab, we're just going to disable that particular attribute. Now, the way we do that is we go again, sudo nano etc Ansible CFG. I've still got the same window open from just before as I move my ugly mug. And what we're going to do as we go down, we're going to remove host checking equals false. Now I'm a little scared that I haven't made a backup of that sudo cp etc Ansible CFG dot backup dot 30.6.20. I did have 3 beers before this. I should have started with that. Sometimes it's easier to, I would say not have beers, but copy etc Ansible to CFG to its home. Ansible CFG Ansible. Let's just specify the path. Let's get in some good habits. Dot backup. Let's just do that. Excellent. We now have a backup of that because I don't know what I had modified. As I said, I did have 3 beers. That's not great for professional communication, but we're hoping they haven't watched this part. Let's go down. Oh no, I did have it. Control X, Y, enter. And if it says you can't modify because it's read only, it's more than likely because you didn't use sudo. And I've got that in the comments how to actually do that right there. So, guess what all? That actually takes us to the end of the Ansible configuration file. As I said, there wasn't a lot to it. As someone that just needs to get awareness that there is an existence of a config file and some core elements in it, that's all you need to know for now. As you start to do more interesting things around modules, or if you get some interesting problems around timeouts, or you want to run a play against 100 or 200 devices, that's where you'll go back to this Ansible configuration file and you'll have some real fun with it. Remember, always try and take a backup. So what have we done? We've addressed those darn old school routers with weak ciphers. We've looked at Ansible configuration file awareness, and we've disabled strict host checking. It's great for a lab, not so good for prod. Speaking of lab, that's just some kit I have in the garage that's turning power to heat at a few cents a minute. I've got an old SRX, old 1800, an 1111, and really old 4948 that is a giant waste of, it's not good for the environment. And next to my back rollers, because I have a bad back, I've got some craft beer that I hide. I've got a nice 6-pack in there. So thanks everyone for watching. The next one, we're going to tackle some Ansible host files as we build up, ready to execute our first play to do something. Okay everyone, appreciate your time and have a great night.